You see they have a pretty interesting two-track design there with independent suspensions. You can see the panel out in the distance there that they have to drive to. But of course, I mentioned just getting to the panel is hard. Now you can get close to the panel, but then everything has to be working just right. Or, with Iowa State here, they had, I believe I paused it. Now this is at either 4 or 8x speed, but they had some trouble. They were driving around. Motor controllers were sticking. They ended up doing some circles, spinning around, doing some donuts. Every time this happened, they would lose the panel from their field of view. Keep in mind, they're looking first person through one of those cameras up on the mast there. So they're trying to track where the panel is as they're spinning in all these circles. Finally, they get it back in sight, able to make their way over to the panel. That's the first part of the task. Iowa State, they were out there ready to do some great work. And they line up. In the second video here, you're going to see something interesting start to happen. And this is sped up a little bit. They're getting lined up here, starting to read things. And it starts subtly, but in a second here, there it is. You see their arms start to get a bad case of the shakes. And they're going to get worse and worse. And I was standing right behind this when this happened, as was their advisor, and those were violent shakes. We were really starting to expect everything to fall apart, and there's a quick rapid flail, start shaking even harder, and wait for it. And there it goes. And about 5 seconds after that, their advisor and I started to sniff. That smells like burning silicon. There's smoke coming out of the rover. Yep, they burned out their arm's motor controller. And when I say burned out, there was smoke pouring out from inside the case. Exactly. So we're going to move on here to York University. York University are defending champions from 2009. They had an incredible rover last year's competition. This year they had another great rover. See it out here working in the field. And this video takes about 4 minutes. I'll try to walk you through it. This shows almost the entirety of the task for them. And again, this is sped up. It's a little jerky early on. I apologize for that. You can see it making their way out here. Now, the team member that's standing behind, she's not actually controlling anything or relaying anything out. We allow teams to have someone follow for emergency cases. If the rover actually catches on fire or something goes catastrophically wrong, there's a big red button that you can see right there that she can slap, and that's the master kill switch. So we allow them to have that for contingency purposes. Now, as the rover starts to operate here, I'm going to point out they use a Cartesian coordinate system arm here. Everything operates on linear axes. The whole stack can slide right to left on the front of the rover. You can see right here with their power screw sliding up and down. The Cartesian coordinate arms they can be a lot easier to operate. They don't allow you some of the configurations that a traditional angular spherical coordinate system arm similar to a human arm can offer you, but they become a lot easier to implement, a lot easier to operate. And so you can see here they start working their way through the switches. They toggle them. They had to toggle them on and off. There was a little bit of confusion about toggling them on, off, on, how many times. But all the teams were able to get through this pretty well. And this whole series here takes place over the course of about 32 minutes. They didn't get off to a clean start right at the beginning. They were still scrambling when the clock started to work out the last couple bugs in the code, making sure all the connections are in place. That's one of the things that actually hinders a lot of teams when they get everything out in the field. All these moving parts, once you get these complex motion patterns taking place, a lot of times the rovers will actually disconnect their own wires. Something gets caught up on a thread, turn your arm the wrong way, and all of a sudden, pop, there goes a camera, or pop, there goes a battery. So some pretty difficult teams have to be careful of. York University You see one camera up here. They have a number of other small webcams that are up high in this very tall mast. They have other cameras that are positioned out on the arm. So they really had a lot of great vantage points that they were able to watch the operations take place through here. Now you can see this is where one of the unique things with URC is we try to put the teams in tasks where it's not just a design challenge. How well can you design and build a rover? There's a lot of operational influences that go into this, because the operator input is actually going to drive design, it's going to drive construction, it's going to make your overall system better and more robust. And when you have the operators and the designers working together, and in this case they're the same, you end up with some impressive systems. So as they're going through here, actually that last sequence, they were working on this perpendicular plane off on the side here. And instead of squaring themselves up, they realized they were able to just reach over and go sideways, reach some of those switches. Now they realigned themselves up here, and this is where they tried to take a stab at some of the power cords. They started to get a little bit out of order, so they weren't getting maximum points on everything, but they were still making their way through a lot of the tasks. You can see here they try to come in, grab the cord. It's difficult to figure out exactly where the cord is. They're just kind of dangling down there. They're not very rigid when they're dropped down there. They're only fixed at one point at the very top of the panel. So grabbing this cord, you're constantly moving it as you're trying to pinch in on it. It's incredibly difficult to grasp. So finally, they get one of the cords here. And right as this was taking place, the young woman who was there for emergency cases said, yeah, I'm pretty sure our slack control motor burnt out, which it had, which is why you saw them, all of a sudden they came to this realization, they realized time was starting to wind down, so they had the plug, they were able to get in their hands, they couldn't control the slack, had to drop it, and it was time to make a quick haul back to the base. The Magma team here, Polish Rover, now they have, what I was referring to earlier, an arm that operates in spherical coordinate systems. This is more of your traditional 6 degree of freedom arm, that when you think of a robotic arm, this is probably the first thing that pops into a lot of people's heads. You can see where their camera is mounted back here. With this one camera back here, they had trouble getting depth perception, and you'll see in a little bit where that comes into play. But as they start going through some of the sequence here, I'll point out a few other interesting things about their rovers. They realized that their wheels here weren't getting enough traction. And you can't quite see it here. You might be able to make it out. There's some slight banding around it there. And what they actually did was they took medical tubing. They found that they could take medical tubing and wrap it around the toroid of the wheel the whole way around, and that was just enough to give them a little bit of traction and help them operate in the various sandy conditions out at MDRS. So you can see their arms starting to come through here, and it's twitching up and down, but it's still a couple inches away, and some of that's because of the camera position. And there, of course, again, another issue with depth perception there. A little jumpy on the throttle. I hope they're not driving behind me at any point. But yeah, they finally do get a grasp on the depth perception there, and able to get through a lot of the switches. But it's something incredibly tricky. Remembering that everything is coming to you in feedback from a two-dimensional perspective. You see another instance here where they're starting to crash into the board, not quite as violently this time. We were thankful that they didn't hit it too hard and impale anything. And there, they finally settled on a nice, steady brush down that was able to help them get the switch. The Oregon State team, you can see a couple shots of them in action here. Oregon State, and you can see by these last two images, and they're going to show the first-person video from the rover's eyes a little bit later. But you can see they were the only team to insert a plug. They were able to get one plug in. This was a tremendous accomplishment. They really deserve an unbelievable amount of credit just for this one simple operation here. I'm blown away that they were able to tackle it. They even almost got a second plug in. Just a tremendous job. And you can see after the first event here, Oregon State was in the lead with 55, 44 for York, and 28 for the Magma team. So we move on to the site survey task. Site survey is a picture from 2009 when we had the same task. Had to drive out into the field and use any sensors you can fit on board to survey several markers out in the field. You can see a white PVC pipe sticking out in the distance there. They're about 4 inches in diameter, about 5 feet tall.